The afternoon sun was warm, but the girl did not feel its heat. She walked slowly through the busy street, her steps light and uncertain, as if she did not have the strength to walk any faster. The market around her was full of sounds. People calling out prices, children laughing, shopkeepers arranging fruit and bread on their stalls. But her mind was focused on only one thing: finding something to eat. Her stomach had been empty since morning, and even before that, she had eaten only a small piece of bread someone gave her out of kindness. She kept her head down as she moved along the street. Her clothes looked old, not dirty or torn, but worn from many days of use. Her shoes were thin, and every small stone she stepped on made her wince. Still, she kept going. People passed around her, too busy with their own lives to notice the quiet child weaving through the crowd. At the center of the market, a small crowd had gathered. A man was playing music on a guitar, and people clapped along. Some recorded him on their phones, others dropped coins into a box at his feet. Music always drew people together, and the girl could feel the sound pulling her in, too. Not because she wanted to watch, but because she hoped the people there might be kind. Maybe someone would give her something to eat. Maybe someone would listen. She walked closer, her heart beating a little faster. She saw a food stall nearby with warm flatbreads stacked in a metal tray. The smell made her mouth water. She stood still for a moment, unsure of what she should do. Asking for food was always difficult. Some people ignored her, some frowned, some even told her to go away. But she was too hungry now to think about pride or fear. She pressed her fingers together, took a slow breath, and stepped into the open space near the crowd. A few people turned to look at her, noticing her small size and tired expression. She did not look like someone who belonged there. She looked out of place, like someone passing through a world that had no space made for her. The guitar player finished his song, and the crowd clapped loudly. Accepting the applause, he looked satisfied. That moment of noise gave the girl enough courage to speak. She lifted her voice, though it trembled at first. "Can I perform for a piece of food?" she asked calmly. Her question floated in the air for a second before anyone reacted. The crowd looked at her, confused. Then a few people laughed. Not harshly, but with the amused disbelief people have when they think a child is joking. Someone said, "Perform? You?" Another chuckled, shaking his head. The girl felt their laughter like a cold wind blowing across her skin, but she did not step back. She stood still, her eyes gentle yet steady. "I can play," she said again, her voice a bit firmer this time. The guitar player raised an eyebrow. He did not seem cruel, only surprised. "You want to play? On what?" he asked, spreading his hands to show the lack of instruments. The girl looked around and pointed at an old upright piano pushed against the wall of a nearby shop. It was dusty, sun-faded, and missing a small piece of wood near the top. Most people barely noticed it anymore. It had been there for months, moved out of the shop because it was too damaged to sell. She lifted her hand toward it and asked, "May I try that?" The shop owner, a middle-aged man with a towel thrown over his shoulder, heard her. He glanced at the piano, then at her. "That old thing doesn't even work right," he said. "Why do you want it?" "I just want to play one song," she replied quietly. "I won't break it." Some of the crowd laughed again, though not all of them. A few people watched her more carefully now, picking up on something different in her tone. It wasn't the voice of someone seeking attention. It was the voice of someone who really meant what she said. The shop owner sighed. He wasn't a bad man, but he was busy and didn't want trouble. Still, something in the girl's eyes softened him a little. "Fine," he said, pointing toward the piano. "If you can make a sound come out of it, go ahead. But I can't promise it will be worth anything." The girl nodded gratefully. She walked toward the piano with slow steps, not because she wanted to delay, but because she was trying to gather her strength. Playing while hungry was not easy, but her love for music always gave her energy. When she reached the piano, she gently brushed the dust off the wooden surface with her sleeve. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment. The white keys were stained, and some of the black ones were chipped. But it didn't matter to her. She had played on worse. Behind her, the crowd continued murmuring. "This is going to be funny," someone whispered. Another person raised their phone, ready to record. A few others simply crossed their arms, waiting, unsure if they should expect something good or foolish. The girl sat on the hard stool, straightened her back, and placed her small hands on the keys. She took a deep breath, letting the noise of the market fade from her mind. The world around her seemed to pause for that brief moment. As she pressed the first key, the sound was not perfect. It was a little dull, a little worn, but it was real, and that was enough for her. Inside, she felt a small spark. She could play. She would play. She closed her eyes for a second, allowing herself to remember the soft voice of the person who had taught her long ago, guiding her hands across another piano that once sat in a warm room she no longer had. She remembered the smell of old books and the gentle way the notes made her feel safe. She let her fingers fall into place. The crowd leaned in just a little. Then, with a calm breath, she began to play. The first few notes drifted out softly, almost uncertain. They hung in the warm market air like tiny threads of sound. People expected her to stop at any moment, expecting clumsy playing or broken tunes. But the more she played, the clearer the notes became. Her fingers moved gracefully across the keys, finding patterns, familiar shapes, and memories woven into melodies. The market noise around her did not disappear, but it felt distant, as if the piano had created a small space that belonged only to her. The crowd grew quieter, their curiosity turning into something else. Surprised faces softened. Some lowered their phones, realizing this was not what they had expected. The girl did not look at them. She was focused only on the music. Each note she played carried her hunger, her hope, her tiredness, and the tiny spark of strength she had left. A few children in the front stopped whispering and watched with wide eyes. A man who had laughed earlier slowly uncrossed his arms. Even the shop owner, busy counting money at his stall, turned his head toward her, confused by the shift in the air. The melody built gently, rising and falling like a quiet river. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She played because music was the only thing she had that still felt like hers. And as the tune filled the open space, the crowd felt it too. The laughter faded completely now. People stood still, listening. Some felt a small ache in their chest without knowing why. There was something honest in the way she played, simple, expressive, and full of emotion. She continued for a long moment, letting the notes speak for her. They told the crowd the story she could not express in words. They told of long days, quiet nights, and the comfort she found in music even when everything else felt unkind. As she neared the end of the song, her fingers slowed, the melody becoming softer, lighter. When the final note faded, it left a gentle stillness behind. For a second, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon, the entire crowd applauded. Not with amusement, but with real respect. The girl looked up, surprised by the reaction. Her eyes bright with a mix of relief and disbelief. She had asked for food. But in that moment, she received something else. Attention, kindness, and a chance to be seen. The part of the story the crowd did not know was just beginning. And though she did not show it on her face, inside her heart something warm flickered. A small hope, fragile but real. The girl had played one song, and the world around her had finally listened. The moment the girl finished playing, the sound of the final note hung in the warm air for a heartbeat longer than anyone expected. Then the applause came, gentle at first and then stronger as people realized what they had witnessed. She didn't turn to look at them right away. Her hands stayed resting on the keys, as if letting the last piece of the melody settle inside her before she moved. Her breath was slow, steady, but her heart felt like it was beating too fast. When she finally looked up, she saw something she wasn't used to, quiet admiration. Not pity, not amusement, not judgment. People were simply watching her with surprise, maybe even respect. It made her feel both seen and unsure, as though she wasn't sure if she should trust the moment or keep her guard up. The shop owner who had allowed her to play stood behind his counter with his arms crossed. But his expression had changed. Before, He had only seen a hungry child asking for food. Now he saw someone who had talent far beyond what he expected. He stepped forward slightly and asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" The girl lowered her gaze, unsure if she should answer. She wasn't used to people asking about her past. It was safer not to say too much. But something in the shop owner's tone felt gentle enough to answer. "I learned at home," she said, her voice soft. Someone in the crowd asked, "Did you take lessons?" She shook her head. "Someone taught me. I just listened and practiced." The crowd murmured, impressed. A woman in a long dress came closer and placed a piece of warm bread on the piano near her hand. "Here, you earned this," she said kindly. The girl slowly picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. She whispered a small, sincere thank you before taking a careful bite. The warmth of the bread seemed to melt through her, easing the tightness in her stomach. As she ate, some people began to move on, but many stayed, curious to see if something more would happen. The guitarist, who had been the center of attention before she arrived, watched her with a mixture of respect and confusion. He had spent years practicing his craft, and now here was this quiet child who had silenced an entire crowd in moments. He walked over and tapped the top of the piano lightly. "That was something," he said. "Can you play another one?" The girl looked at him. Her hunger was slowly fading as the food settled inside her, but she still felt a deep tiredness from the long day. She didn't want to demand anything more from the crowd. She didn't want to look like she was performing just for attention. But another part of her, the part that loved the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers, wanted to play again. "I can," she said softly, "if it's all right." The guitarist nodded and stepped aside, giving her space. The shop owner didn't stop her this time. In fact, he leaned against the counter with interest. The girl wiped her hands gently on her skirt, so she wouldn't leave grease on the keys. She placed her fingers on the piano again and took in another slow breath. This time she didn't close her eyes. She looked at the keys, focusing on the small cracks and faded colors. She remembered the way she used to practice at home. At night, in the quiet, when she didn't want anyone to hear her mistakes. She began to play a second song, simpler than the first. The melody was soft, calm, like the sound of water moving across stones. It wasn't a showy piece. It wasn't meant to impress. It was the kind of music that made people stop and breathe for a moment. The notes blended easily, filling the space in a way that felt gentle and warm. This time, the crowd didn't laugh, didn't whisper, didn't mock. They simply listened. Even the children who had been restless earlier stood still. A boy tugged his mother's sleeve and whispered, "She's really good." His mother nodded, her eyes focused on the girl's moving hands. The guitarist watched with a quiet appreciation, his foot tapping lightly on the ground. The shop owner, who normally only cared about sales, found himself drifting closer to the front of his stall without realizing it. The girl played for a few minutes, letting the melody grow slightly before bringing it back down to a soft, peaceful end. When she finished, the crowd clapped again, but more gently this time, as if they didn't want to break the calm she created. She smiled only a little. It wasn't a big smile, just a small lift at the corners of her mouth. It was the first time that day she had felt anything close to happiness. A man from the crowd stepped forward. He wore a clean shirt and carried a small notebook. "Do you play often?" he asked. "Only when I can," she replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "You have real talent. You shouldn't waste it." He seemed to want to ask more questions, but he stopped himself. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small packet of nuts and dried fruit. "Here. You need this more than I do." She accepted it gratefully. The shop owner walked over at last and stood a few feet away from her. His tone was more serious now, less casual. "Where are you staying?" he asked. The girl hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to explain everything either. "I stay where I can," she answered. He nodded slowly. He could see the truth even without details. He didn't push further. "You play well," he said. "If you ever want to play here again. The piano is old, but it works enough for someone like you." Those words felt like an invitation, something she wasn't expecting. She lowered her eyes shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. Some people began to leave now, satisfied with the small moment of beauty they had witnessed. Others lingered, hoping she might play again, but she knew she shouldn't push herself too far. Her body still felt weak from the long hours without food. She stepped off the stool and gently closed the piano cover before any dust could fall on the keys again. She looked at the shop owner, then at the guitarist, then at the crowd. "Thank you for listening," she said quietly. The guitarist smiled at her and gave a small nod. "Come back if you want," he said. "People here like good music." She held the packet of food close to her chest and stepped away from the piano. The crowd slowly parted for her, allowing her to walk through without feeling crowded or ignored. As she moved through the narrow path people had made, she heard small comments around her. "She's amazing. I didn't expect that. Poor kid. I hope someone helps her." But no one spoke directly to her now. They simply watched her go. She walked back into the heart of the market, away from the applause and the music. Her steps were steadier now, not as weak as before. The food in her hands felt like a treasure. The warmth from the bread still lingered in her chest. She didn't know where she would sleep that night. She didn't know what the next day would bring. But for a brief moment, in that small corner of the busy market, she had found something precious. She had found a place where her music mattered. And that small moment, that tiny flicker of recognition, gave her more strength than she expected. It wasn't a promise for the future, not yet, but it was something to hold on to. As she stepped into the fading sunlight, the soft echo of the piano keys played in her mind, reminding her that even in the hardest moments, she carried something inside her that no one could take away. The girl kept walking, holding her hope close, not knowing that the moment she created had already begun to change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow across the market as the girl slowly walked away from the crowd. The sounds of the busy street grew louder again. Vendors calling out their prices, people chatting, laughter rising from small groups. But she heard everything differently now. It was as if her brief moment at the piano had created a quiet, protective space inside her mind. And even though the market was noisy, she felt calm. Her fingers still tingled from playing, and the rhythm of the last song she performed kept echoing in her thoughts. She held her packet of nuts and dried fruit close, pressing it gently against her chest like a small gift she couldn't afford to lose. Hunger had slowed her down earlier, but now she felt a little stronger. Not completely full, but no longer weak. Even though she had stepped away, her performance was not forgotten. In the distance, she could still hear people talking about her. She didn't turn around, but she sensed that she had left an impression. She wasn't used to that feeling. Mostly, she had learned to disappear into crowds, not stand out in them. She walked past small shops and colorful stalls, her eyes searching for a quiet place to sit. The market had so many corners where people rarely looked. Shaded spots beside walls, empty crates, or broken benches tucked away behind stores. She found one near a small tea stall, where a few wooden crates were stacked out of the way. It wasn't clean, but it was sheltered from the wind. The girl sat down slowly, pulling her knees close. She opened the small packet of dried fruit and ate just enough to keep her energy up. She saved the rest, knowing she would need it later. She had learned to think ahead. Life had taught her not to eat everything at once. For a long moment, she just sat there. She watched the movement of the market, the soft glow of lanterns being lit, the steam rising from food stalls, the tired steps of workers heading home. She always loved watching people. It made her feel less alone. As she sat, she heard footsteps approach. Someone stopped near her, but she didn't look up immediately. She had learned that strangers could bring either kindness or trouble, and she needed a moment to understand which it was. "Hey!" a quiet voice said. She lifted her head slightly. It was the same guitarist from earlier. He stood a few feet away, not wanting to scare her or seem too direct. He had his guitar case slung over his shoulder, and he looked more thoughtful now than he had during his performances. "Can I sit here?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then nodded. He took a seat on a crate across from her, giving her enough space to feel safe. "I saw you walk away," he said softly. And I don't know. I felt like I should check on you." The girl looked down, unsure how to respond. "You play beautifully," he continued. "You know that, right? You're not just good, you're really good." She shrugged lightly, not out of pride but because she didn't know how to accept compliments. "I just tried my best," she said. "That wasn't trying," he said with a small laugh. "That was real talent." She didn't know whether to smile or stay quiet. She settled somewhere in between. After a moment, he leaned forward slightly. "Do you play often?" "Only when I find something to play on," she said honestly. He nodded, thinking deeply. You know, people don't get chances like that often. To be heard. To be seen. She looked at him now, her eyes curious. "I think you could go far," he said. "If someone helped you. If you had a place to play or lessons. Something." The girl lowered her eyes again, not wanting to think about things that might never happen. Dreams were fragile things, and hers had been broken before. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just play because I like it." The guitarist smiled warmly. "Sometimes that's enough to start something big." Before he could say more, the shop owner from earlier appeared at the edge of the alley. He looked like he had been searching for her. The girl quickly straightened up, unsure if she was in trouble. "There you are," the shop owner said, walking closer. "I wanted to talk to you." The guitarist stepped aside respectfully. The girl watched the shop owner with careful eyes. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that old piano sits outside my shop every day. No one touches it. No one buys it. It just sits there collecting dust." She listened quietly. "You brought it back to life today," he said with a soft smile. "If you want, you can play there whenever you like. I won't charge you, and I won't stop you." Her eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "You brought people to my shop today. Customers stayed longer. Some even bought things just because they wanted to hear you. So, if you want a place to play, consider that piano yours." The girl didn't know what to say. Her chest tightened with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a gentle nod and stepped back. "Just take care of yourself. And if you ever need a warm drink, come inside. I can at least offer that." When he walked away, the guitarist smiled again. "See? People notice you. More than you think." The girl felt warmth spreading through her chest. Not from food, not from sunlight, but from kindness. True kindness. Something she didn't often receive. Once the guitarist left too, she remained on the crate for a while, thinking about everything that had happened. She couldn't help replaying the moment she sat in front of the piano for the first time that day, when people laughed at her. And then the moment when the music silenced them. Felt almost unreal, like something that didn't belong in her life. But it did. It had happened. The sky grew darker. Lanterns flickered overhead, casting warm circles of light. She knew she needed to find a place to rest for the night. She stood up slowly, tucking the leftover food into her small bag. Still, before she left, she walked back toward the shop. The piano stood there, old and worn, but now she saw it differently. It was no longer just a forgotten instrument. It was a place where she had been seen. She gently touched the edge of the piano, not to play, but to feel connected to it for another moment. As she walked away again, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A little bit of hope. A tiny spark, but real. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if the kindness she received today would last. But for the first time in a long while, she believed that something good could happen. The moon rose higher, casting a soft glow over the market as she continued walking. The melody she played earlier still echoed inside her mind, guiding her steps like a quiet promise. The girl disappeared into the evening streets, carrying with her a new sense of possibility, one she had never expected to find in that busy market. And behind her, though she could no longer hear it, the memory of her music still lingered with the people who had witnessed it. A memory that would travel farther than she could imagine, weaving its way into the hearts of all who heard it. The night passed slowly for the girl. She found a sheltered corner behind a row of closed shops, where the warm air from a nearby bakery drifted through the cracks in the wall. It wasn't a bed, but it was safe enough, and she was used to making the best of whatever she found. She curled up with her small bag under her head and let her eyes close. The sounds of the market faded one by one until only the soft hum of distant traffic remained. She slept lightly, the way someone does when they cannot fully relax. But even then, she dreamed not dark dreams, but soft ones. In her dreams, she was sitting at a real piano, one that wasn't broken or sun-faded. She felt warm, she felt calm, and she felt like she belonged somewhere. It was only a dream, but it wrapped around her like a blanket. When the morning light reached her, she woke with a slow blink. Her body felt stiff from the hard ground, but her mind felt clearer. The memory of yesterday returned, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a little excited about a new day. Usually mornings meant another long search for food, another day of wandering. But today she had somewhere to go. She had a piano waiting for her. She stood up, brushed dust from her clothes, and stretched her tired limbs. The market was already waking up. Vendors were unpacking crates, sweeping their stalls, or lighting small stoves. The smell of fresh bread floated through the air again, warm and tempting. She walked slowly toward the shop where the piano stood. She didn't want to appear too eager or make herself a burden. But she also wanted to see if the shop owner had meant what he said. Maybe he had only been kind for the moment. Maybe today things would be different. When she reached the shop, the owner was already arranging items on a wooden shelf. He looked up and noticed her right away. "You're here early," he said, not unkindly. She lowered her eyes. "I didn't want to get in the way." He wiped his hands on his towel. "You're not in the way. If you want to play again, you can. The piano's still there." Her chest filled with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. She sat at the piano, lifting the cover slowly. The keys looked the same as yesterday. Faded, chipped, some slightly uneven. But now they felt familiar, like the face of an old friend. Before she played anything, she rested her hands on the keys and let the softness of the moment settle inside her. She started with a simple tune. Something soft, something light. A melody she could play even without thinking. The morning air carried the sound gently, mixing with the distant clatter of stalls being opened. Some early shoppers paused to listen. A few smiled. Others dropped coins near the piano, though she hadn't asked for anything. She didn't stop them. She simply played on. As she played, the shop owner stepped out to watch her again. He leaned against the door frame, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. It amazed him that someone so young could create something so calming, especially in a place as busy as the market. After a while, she finished the song and looked up at him. "I hope I'm not bothering anyone," she said. He laughed softly. "You're improving my morning, that's for sure." She smiled a little, a shy smile but real. A few minutes later, an older woman approached the piano. She wore simple clothes but carried herself with a kind of quiet dignity. She watched the girl closely before speaking. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked. The girl hesitated for a moment, then answered softly. "Someone taught me when I was younger. I used to practice whenever I could." The woman nodded as if she understood something deeper than the words themselves. "Music stays with us," she said kindly, "even when everything else changes." The girl looked at her, surprised by how true those words felt. The woman placed a small wrapped pastry on the edge of the piano. "Eat something," she said. "You play even better when you're not hungry." The girl thanked her with wide, grateful eyes. As the morning continued, more people stopped to listen. Some for only a minute, some for much longer. She played different melodies. Soft ones, gentle ones, tunes she remembered from her past. The market seemed to slow down around her, as if her music created a little bubble of peace in the middle of the noise. But the most unexpected moment came when a man dressed neatly in a light shirt and clean shoes approached the piano. He watched her hands closely as she finished a tune. He didn't clap when she stopped. Instead, he studied her with interest. "That was incredible," he said. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone who plays with that kind of feeling?" She didn't answer right away. Compliments from strangers still confused her. The man kneeled slightly so he could meet her eyes. I teach music, he said. Piano, mostly. I've listened to thousands of students. The way you play, it isn't something you can fake. Her breath caught. She didn't know whether to believe him. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small business card. If you want, I can help you. Lessons, practice, maybe even an audition one day. You don't have to decide now. The girl stared at the card. She felt her heart beating faster. It felt unreal, like someone offering her a piece of a life she thought she had lost forever. Before she could respond, the man added, "Only if you want to. No pressure. I just think you deserve a chance." She looked at the card again, then carefully tucked it into her small bag. "Thank you," she said softly. He smiled gently. "Keep playing. You have something special." When he walked away, the shop owner approached her. "You see," he said with a proud grin. "I told you yesterday. You brought life to that piano." The girl felt overwhelmed. Not in a bad way, but in a way she didn't know how to handle yet. Happiness wasn't something she experienced often enough to understand how to carry it. She played one more melody. Something slow, full of emotion she couldn't put into words. People gathered again, listening in peaceful silence. When she finished, she rested her hands in her lap. The shop owner placed a small drink beside her. "For later," he said. "You earned it." She nodded, grateful. More people approached throughout the morning. Some left coins, some left food, some left kind words. The girl didn't know what to do with so much kindness. She tried to take it slowly, holding on to each moment carefully. By midday, she decided to rest. She stood up, stretched her back, and gently closed the piano cover. She didn't want to tire herself too much. She knew how fragile she could feel if she overplayed. The shop owner came to her side. "You're welcome here any time," he said. "Don't forget that." The girl nodded. She felt a deep warmth blooming inside her chest. A small sense of home. Not a permanent home, not yet, but something close. A place where she was allowed to exist, to be heard, to be valued. As she stepped away from the piano, she looked back at it one last time. Yesterday, it had been just an old, forgotten instrument. Today, it felt like a doorway to something she never expected. And even though she didn't know what the future held, she walked away carrying a feeling she had not felt in a long time. She was not invisible anymore. Her music had given her a voice, and people were finally listening. The moment the girl finished her final note, the street seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The sound of her music still hung in the air, as if the melody didn't want to leave yet. For a short while, everyone simply stood there, not sure how to react. Moments earlier, many of them were laughing or whispering about her. Now, those same people were staring at her with wide eyes, feeling something they didn't expect. The girl sat there quietly, her hands resting on her lap. She wasn't used to being in the center of attention. Her heart was still beating fast, not because she was scared, but because the music had taken everything she had inside. She didn't even lift her head at first. She just took a deep breath and released it slowly, trying to calm herself. Then, the shop owner stepped closer, holding a small meal he had prepared for her. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood there, unsure of how to start. A moment ago, he thought she was just another street kid trying to get free food. But now, after hearing her play, he couldn't look at her the same way. He gently placed the food on the piano and pushed it toward her. She lifted her head slightly, surprised by the kindness. He gave her a warm smile and nodded, letting her know it was for her. Her eyes softened, and she whispered a small thank you before taking the plate carefully, as if it were something precious. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. People around her watched quietly, some feeling bad, others simply amazed. A few of them stepped closer to talk to her. One person asked where she learned to play so beautifully. She hesitated at first, unsure if she should share her story, but she felt their sincerity and finally opened her heart. She told them about the person in her life who taught her to play when she was much younger. Music was always something that brought peace to her home, even on difficult days. But life changed, and she eventually had no choice but to find her own way. The piano became something she carried in her memory because she didn't always have access to a real one. As she spoke, the shop owner listened carefully. He felt something pull at him, guilt, maybe, or a sense of responsibility. He looked at his old piano, the one she had just played on. It had been sitting there for years, barely touched. Now it had become the center of something unexpected. He realized how easily he had judged her. But she didn't complain or blame anyone. She just shared her story honestly, and her simple way of speaking made it even more touching. She nodded shyly and told him she would return. Not because she wanted free food, but because she genuinely loved the piano. He smiled and told her the instrument was always waiting for her. Before leaving, she took one more look at the piano. That old, dusty instrument had opened a door she never imagined. The musician who offered to help her stood beside her and told her he would come back the next day to talk more. She nodded again softly. She didn't have big dreams before, but now something new was forming inside her. A small spark, a quiet hope. A few minutes later, she began walking down the street, holding her food and feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't just a hungry girl anymore. People had seen her, really seen her. They had listened to her without mocking her. They had recognized her talent and wanted to help her. Some of the people who recorded her performance on their phones quickly shared it online. They wrote kind messages about her, describing how she turned a noisy street into a moment of pure beauty. The video started to spread, reaching even more people throughout the day. Comments began to appear. Messages from strangers who felt touched, some even saying they cried listening to her. The girl didn't know any of this yet. She was walking through the streets, feeling the evening air brushing against her skin. She didn't carry much with her, but her heart felt lighter than usual. She felt like she finally mattered, even if just for a moment. As she found a quiet corner to finish her meal, she thought about the day she just lived. It started with hunger and laughter directed at her, but it ended with applause, kindness, and a promise she never expected. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she wanted to find out. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined herself sitting in front of a grand piano, not just an old street instrument. She pictured people listening without judgment. She pictured herself playing without fear. The dream felt too big, but the small spark inside her didn't let it go. That night, she slept with a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in years. And somewhere in the city, the old piano sat quietly outside the shop, carrying the echoes of her beautiful melody. The day had changed her, but it had also changed everyone who heard her play. A single moment of courage had opened a new path. And the girl, who once asked for a piece of food, now carried something far more important. A chance at a new beginning.